Hi guys! Welcome to Law Diaries Lex Comentarios. So for today's video, we are going to talk about Article 28 of the RPC. So Article 28 talks about computation of penalties. Computation of penalties. So itong article na to guys, malalaman natin dito kung kailan tayo mag-start na mag-compute or kailan tayo mag-start na mag-count ng duration ng sentence ng isang offender.
Or kailan natin malalaman na nag-start ng mag-serve ng kanyang sentence ang isang offender.
So basahin muna natin ang Article 28. Article 28, Computation of penalties. If the offender shall be in prison, the term of the duration of the temporary penalties shall be computed from the day on which the judgment of conviction shall have become final. If the offender is not in prison, the term of the duration of the penalties consisting of deprivation of liberty shall be computed from the day that the offender is placed at the disposal of the judicial authorities for the enforcement of the penalty. The duration of the other penalties shall be computed only from the day on which the defendant commences to serve his sentence. So dito guys, may tatlong rules kung paano natin makukompute or makakount yung penalties ng isang offender. The director of prisons or warden should compute the penalties imposed upon the convicts of serving the following rules. So the first rule guys is when the offender is in prison. So kapag yung offender is nasa prison na guys, the duration of temporary penalties is from the day on which the judgment of the conviction becomes final.
So sa rule number 1 guys is kapag yung offender is nandun na sa jail or na-imprison na, ganun.
So kapag na-imprison na ang isang offender guys, yung duration ng temporary penalties, please take note guys na we are talking here temporary penalties. So, yung duration ng temporary penalties, guys, is magsa-start lang siya after the judgment of conviction becomes final.
So, habang nandun yung offender sa prison, guys, hindi pa nagsa-start yung service niya sa kanyang kasalanan or sa crime na kanyang ginawa. Magsa-start lamang siya mag-serve ng kanyang sentence kapag meron ng final judgment from the court.
So, ano yung reason sa rule na to, guys? It is because temporary detention of the accused, guys, is not considered as penalty. It is only considered as preventive measures. So, hindi magsa-start yung penalty na yon or hindi magsa-start nag-count yung sentence ng penalty ng isang accused kapag nasa prison siya. Kasi, again, yung temporary detention, guys, it is not a penalty but only a preventive measure. So, yun yon. Yun yung first rule. Now, let's go to the second rule. When the offender is not in prison, the duration of penalty consisting in deprivation of liberty is from the day that the offender is placed at the disposal of judicial authorities for the enforcement of the penalties. So, eto guys is please take note na sa rule number 1 guys, we are talking temporary penalties. While sa rule number 2 guys, we are talking the duration of penalties consisting deprivation of liberty. Ito yung penalties guys na na-deprive talaga yung freedom mo or freedom ng isang offender or accused. Sa number 2 din guys is yung situation dito is kapag yung offender is hindi or wala sa prison or wala siya sa loob ng jail.
So yung duration ng penalty niya guys is magsa-start yun kapag nilagay na siya sa disposal ng judicial authorities.
Again, magsa-start yung computation ng isang offender na wala sa kulungan, and then yung duration of penalties niya is consist of deprivation of liberty. Magsa-start yon kapag nilagay na siya sa prison or kapag nilagay na siya sa jail. So, doon magsa-start yung service niya sa kanyang sentence.
So, yun yung rule number 2.
Now, let's proceed to the third rule, which is the duration of other penalties. So the duration is from the day on which the offender commences to serve his sentence. Sa number 3 naman guys, ito yung mga duration ng other penalties such as suspension. If the accused who was in custody appealed, his service of sentence should commence from the date of the promulgation of the decision of the appellate court, not from the date the judgment of the trial court was promulgated. This is cited in the case of Ocampo versus CA. So, ito guys, ito yung instances or ito yung instance or situation kung saan kapag nag-appeal yung isang accused. For example, meron nang na-render na judgments under RTC or dun sa lower court. Kapag minarender ng judgment yun guys, tapos nag-appeal yung accused kasi hindi siya satisfied sa judgment ng RTC. So, yung kaso niya is napunta dun sa Court of Appeals. So, yung start ng sentence niya guys is hindi mag-start dun sa final judgment ng lower court or the RTC or ganon-ganon, but mag-start yung service niya sa kanyang sentence kapag meron ng final decision sa CA or sa appellate court. So, ganun yun. The service of a sentence of one in prison begins only on the day of the judgment of conviction becomes final. This is cited in the case of Baki versus Director of Prisons. So, dito guys, again, yung service ng isang sentence guys is magsa-start na siya kapag meron ng final judgment na na-render ang court. Ganun yun. So, the accused could not be considered as committed or placed in jail by virtue of the decision of the Court of Appeals, although he was already in jail when that judgment was received. The fact of his custody as a mere appellant pending appeal continue, and the receipt of the decision of the CA did not change the detention of the accused into service of judgment. The reading of the sentence of the CA to the accused was still a necessary step previous to the actual commitment of the accused. This is cited in the case of People versus Enriquez.
Again, ito na naman yung case kapag nag-appeal yung accused sa CA.
So now, let's go to example of temporary penalties. Sa rule number 1 guys, diba sabi niya dito is, ito yung duration ng temporary penalties. So ano ba yung mga example ng temporary penalties? So example of temporary penalties includes temporary absolute disqualification, number 2, temporary special disqualification, and number 3 is suspension. Then, rules in cases of temporary penalties. If an offender is under detention, as when he is undergoing preventive imprisonment, rule number 1 applies.
Ito yung mga rules sa temporary penalties kapag yung offender is nag-undergo siya sa preventive imprisonment. Yung rule number 1 yung mag-a-apply guys, which is magsa-start lang yung computation ng service ng isang accused from the when the judgment becomes final na.
And if not under detention because the offender has been released on bail, rule number 3 applies. Pero kapag hindi na-detain itong taong ito guys kasi pinalaya siya kasi nagbayad siya ng bail or ganun-ganon, so yung rule number 1 hindi na ma-apply. But instead, we are going to apply rule number 3, which is duration of other penalties. At magsa-start lang yung computation ng penalties niya guys kapag nag-start na yung offender na mag-serve ng kanyang sentence. So now let's go to rules in cases of penalties consisting in deprivation of liberties.
So ito yung rule number 2 guys.
So when the offender is not in prison.
So ito, rule number 2, a-apply siya.
So if the offender is undergoing preventive imprisonment, the computation of penalty is not from the day that the offender is placed at the disposal of the judicial authorities for the enforcement of the penalty. Rule number 3 applies. That is, the duration of penalty shall be computed from the day which the defendant commences to serve his sentence. But the offender is entitled to a deduction of full time or 4/5 of the time of his detention. So this one guys, kapag yung offender is na-imprison or na-detain siya while pending pa yung case niya, and then suddenly naglabas na ng decision ang court which is guilty talaga siya at dapat niyang mag-serve ng ganito kahabang duration ng penalties, blah blah blah.
Yung time or yung days, months, or years na nagugol niya sa kanyang detention is magiging credited yun sa kanyang service.
The offender is entitled for a deduction of full time or 4/5 of the time of his detention.
So for example guys, na-detain siya ng 1 year sa kulungan habang pending pa yung case niya, and then suddenly lumabas na yung decision ng Supreme Court, and then it was stated there na yung penalty niya is worth, for example, 10 years, charot-charot lang. So, mababawasan yung 1 year na detention niya. So, instead of 10 years guys, magiging 9 years na lang siya. So, mababawas yun. But pwede rin, mabawas only 4/5 lang ng time ng duration niya.
So, I think this ends our video guys. So, again, this is Article 28 of the RPC, which talks about computation of penalties.
Or kailan magsisimula mag-compute ng penalties ng isang accused, or ganon. Kung kailan magsa-start na ng ang isang accused na mag-serve ng kanyang penalties.
So I hope you learned something from this video guys. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Bye-bye!